Hey guys, Chris Fix here. Today I'm going to show you how to flush your brake fluid. I'm putting brand new calipers on my truck because the old ones are going bad, they're leaking, and I don't want to flush the old brake fluid into the brand new calipers. So I'm going to flush the whole system with .3 brake fluid before I change out the brake calipers. The other thing is this fluid hasn't been flushed for probably since the truck was brand new. And this is a 2001 Mazda B3000 Ford Ranger, so in reality it should really be flushed anyway. Brake fluid should be flushed every 2 to 3 years because it's hygroscopic, meaning it likes to absorb water. The problem with water in the brake fluid is when water gets in here, water has a really low boiling point compared to brake fluid. Brake fluid, the boiling point could be 400 degrees, but water boiling point is 212 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's not very high. And the brakes get hot, and they could easily exceed 200 degrees Fahrenheit. So if that happens and you have a lot of water in your brake fluid, the water will vaporize, it'll evaporate, it'll boil, creating a void. When you press on the brake, that void is compressible, so it'll feel like you don't have any brakes, which is bad. Not only will it feel like you don't have any brakes, you won't have any brakes. I'll explain more about brake fluid and how water gets in and all that stuff in another video. Some people say, oh, you can use .4 instead of .3. I'll explain all that in another video. It goes in depth. If you want to see that video, the link will be in the description below. But for this video, we're focusing on how to bleed the brakes. Now there are two methods to use to bleed the brakes. The first method is the two-person method. This is the most common method. You need yourself and a buddy. The buddy presses on the brakes, you open the bleeder valve, close the bleeder valve, and that's the most common way to do it. And I'll also show you the one-person method so you can do the job yourself. So to do this job, you need an open-ended wrench. Check your owner's manual for the brake fluid your car uses. And if you want to use the one-person method, you need some type of small bottle like this and a hose that fits over the bleeder valve. I'll put a link in the description to a quick video on how to make a one-person bleeder. It's really fast and easy to do. The other thing that is optional but it's really helpful is if you have a turkey baster, because the first thing we're going to do is remove as much brake fluid as we can out of the master cylinder. You want to make sure you clean your master cylinder with a paper towel before you open up the cap. Make sure the cap is cleaned off too. You don't want any contaminants getting in. With that cleaned off, we'll open it up, set the cap aside. Now we have our can here. I'm going to suck out as much fluid as I can and put it right in here. The reason why you want to do this first is because when you're flushing your brakes, the brake fluid is coming from the reservoir, then we're pulling new clean fluid through the brake lines instead of the old dirty fluid. And speaking of old dirty fluid, look how dirty this is. New brake fluid is going to be clear, and that's practically black. If you spill any brake fluid, you want to immediately clean it up. Brake fluid is very caustic, it'll eat through paint, it'll cause corrosion on metal. You really don't want brake fluid touching anything. Okay. So you don't want to go too low on the master cylinder because you don't want to get air in through the master cylinder. So this is a pretty good amount taken out of the master cylinder. You can see there's still fluid in the master cylinder to prevent it from running dry so we don't get air into the system. Now I have my new brake fluid. Never buy this in bulk and always use it right away. This doesn't really store on the shelf very well. I'm going to fill the master cylinder with the new fluid. I'm going to overfill it because when I bleed the brakes, we're going to lose a lot of fluid as it bleeds out of each brake. Make sure you always cap this right away. Try to get a seal on this. And then we'll cap this as well. Now I poured that fluid nice and smoothly, so hopefully the new fluid stays near the top and the old fluid stays near the bottom. The good thing about emptying a master cylinder first is now you have some brake fluid that you could use to prevent air bubbles from getting in. So just put your tube on here, screw that in, and make sure that tube goes all the way down to the bottom. So now any air bubbles that come out will get forced into the air up here, and any sucking back will be sucking back brake fluid. I know it's old brake fluid, but it's going to get pushed out anyway, so it's not a big deal. When you're doing this, I like to follow the rule that you're supposed to do the furthest wheel from the master cylinder first, and then go in order. So the second furthest, third furthest, and fourth furthest. So in this case, it's going to go passenger side rear, driver's side rear, passenger side front, driver's side front. So we're going to start at the passenger side rear. That's the furthest away. The ABS system sometimes makes it weird because if the ABS system's in the rear, then your furthest brake lines sometimes are the front ones. But in general, start from the rear, move to the front. The bleeder valve on drum brakes is located usually at the top. You look for the brake line that comes in, and then it's this little valve right here. And you can use a wrench over the bleeder valve to open and close it. So this is the passenger rear The first method I'm going to show you is the two-person method. With the two-person method, all you need is a wrench and another person. One person presses on the brake and the other one opens and closes the bleeder valve. To bleed the brakes, you really don't need to remove the wheels. I'm just doing it so I could easily show you guys and get in there and have good camera angles. But if you really want to, you could keep the wheels on. So with the two-person method, move the wrench counterclockwise to open the bleeder valve. Press the brakes! Then I'm going to close it. Okay! So I'm just telling the person to press the brakes, and they're going to press down, and I'm going to open this. Press the brakes! Then I'm going to close it. Okay! And when I say okay, they can let go. So we're at the master cylinder, and you can see the brake fluid went down, but not a lot. It's only a little below the max. So let's continue flushing the brakes. Make sure you check the master cylinder fluid about every 10 times you press the brake, because you don't want it to run dry. So now I'm going to add more brake fluid since we've been pressing them for a little bit now. And while adding this fluid, we can see that there's no more old brake fluid left in the master cylinder. Press the brakes. Okay. Press the brakes. Okay. As you can see, this brake fluid is as clear as the new brake fluid we put in. So that means this brake line is flushed. Check out the difference between the brake fluid before we did the flush. Press the brakes. So now that we're done with this brake line, I won't tell the other person okay until I tighten the bleeder valve all the way and it's closed. After it's closed, they can let their foot off the brake. You should also have them check to make sure the brake pedal is firm, which indicates you have no air in the system. Okay! You can see this fluid is super clear, and I got a bunch of fluid out. Let's move on to the next one. Since we're going to bleed a new brake, let's add some more fluid. Close that up. Now let's go to the driver's side rear brake, and I'll show you how to use the one-person method. For the one-person method, you'll be doing this on your own, so you want to prevent air from getting in while you're pressing the brake. To do that, we use our bottle system here. We want to fill it up with some brake fluid, and then have the hose beneath that brake fluid. So if it sucks anything up, it's sucking up brake fluid, not air. We want this hose to go above our bleeder valve. You can see our bleeder valve is here. Just slide that over. Make sure that zip tie is really tight around that nipple. Here's where the brake cylinder is with the bleeder valve, and you can see it goes up. Because air travels upwards through the liquid, it won't get sucked back down. It'll be up there and forced out. So now I'm just going to crack this open a little bit more. There you go. You can see brake fluid and air just came out. So now I'm going to go and press the brakes. As I press the brakes, watch the brake fluid force the air out of the tube. You can see the bottle of brake fluid bubbling, yet no air flows back into the brake cylinder. I'm just pressing the brakes to the floor smoothly, and then letting off the brakes, and then repeating. I'll fast forward this and you'll notice how the brake fluid goes from dark to clear, indicating the fluid has been flushed. Also notice it doesn't take as long as the first brake. This is because the one-person method is faster, and because with the first brake, you flushed all the remaining old fluid out of the master cylinder. So now we're just flushing the old fluid out of the brake line only. So I just came out to check to make sure there's no bubbles in the clear tube. It's actually getting a lot clearer. You can see that's what it was before. This is after. So this is working great by myself. Now I'm going to go and check the master cylinder. Okay, the master cylinder is low. It's at this line down here. So I'm going to add more fluid. We've used almost half of this, which means that we're almost halfway done. This is 32 ounces, almost 1 liter, and that'll be just enough to get this brake flush done. Let's finish up on the driver's side rear and move to the passenger side front brakes. You can see that there are no air bubbles in the brake fluid by the bleeder valve, which means that you can tighten it up and you won't have to worry about any air in your brake system. Before we move on, the one-person bleeder is pretty much full, so I'm going to empty it a little more than halfway. So now we're going to the passenger side front brake. On this car, the front brakes are disc brakes. It's going to be bled the same exact way. Here's the bleeder valve, it's at the top. You just loosen it. Same exact thing. So it doesn't matter if you have drum brakes or if you have disc brakes. The bleeding process is the same. So now I just bled this. You don't need to see it. It's off camera. I'm going to do the driver's side, and you'll see that one just so you can see what it's like to do disc brakes, even though it's the same. But you don't need to see this. So I finished the passenger front disc brakes. Let's move to the driver front for the last brake bleeding. So we're doing the same process as we've been doing. Get your clear hose, slide it on there just like that, and then slide down your zip tie so it looks exactly like that. The brake line still goes above the bleeder valve to let air out. So I'm going to just crack this open. Now I'm going to go press on the brakes. So if nothing is coming out, like in this situation, What I'm going to do is I'm going to unscrew this the whole way. Be prepared because brake fluid's probably going to come out. Put a bucket underneath just in case we get a lot of brake fluid. The reason why brake fluid doesn't come out of here is because it's clogged, so we're going to unclog it. So now's a good time to get a tool that has a pick on the end or a toothpick or something ready. Brake fluid's going to start coming out, and you can see there's all rust and contaminants in here. The actual bleeder valve has a hole in it, and that hole's right there. There you go. And you can see that thing was rusted shut. In reality, you should replace your bleeder valve like this if it's like this, but I'm replacing the whole caliper. I'm just trying to bleed all the contaminated fluid out first, so this isn't a big deal. But if I were you and this is the situation and you weren't replacing the brake calipers, I would totally get a new bleeder valve, because this could just rust up again. You're getting your brake fluid contaminated, and it's just going to cause you problems. And eventually, if this is rusting, it's going to just snap on you. And ask me how I know about that. We got the hole working again, got all that rust out. Let's see if it'll work now. All we're going to do is just close this up and get our clear plastic hose back on this, because this time, hopefully this will work. Now I'm going to go check by pressing on the brake. Oh man, look at all that rust. That is disgusting brake fluid. Thank God we're doing this. That is all rusty brake fluid. So we're right here. We want to check our master cylinder, and you can see it's low, so we want to fill it up. Brake fluid in there looks really clear compared to before, and that is great. Just gonna bleed this out a little bit more and then call it a day. Fluid is running pretty clear right now. That's good. So now I'm gonna tighten this. Good. The brake pedal is nice and hard. I'm gonna remove this. So there's our finished product. You got about 1.5 of these, which is exactly a liter or 32 ounces. There's gonna be just enough to fill this back up with brand new fluid. So let's do that now. And we want to fill this to the correct level now because we're done. Good. That's the correct level, right to the max line. We want to make sure the cap is sealed on nice and tight. And we have brake fluid that is good for 2 to 3 years. So that's how you flush your own brake fluid. Hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing. I publish how-to videos weekly, and I answer all the questions and comments you guys leave in the comment section below. On the screen, you're going to see a bunch of brake-related videos. The links to these videos on the screen are in the description as well. Also in the description below are going to be the links to my Chris Fix Facebook and Twitter pages. If you use Facebook or Twitter, go check it out. I just drained out all the brake fluid, and look at all that. All the little pieces of metal and everything, all the grit. I'm glad we did that. That was definitely something that needed to get done.